Hello, I'm going to talk to you today. I don't know how many times I'm going to do these videos, but I'm going to talk to you today about the actual counts of Erdology and the T calendar. The T calendar itself is based off of a sequence of information that was gleaned from the ancient runic system, the Elder Futhark, which is both a German and a Latin name, which means hidden or secret meaning. The runes, the Futhark, the Elder Futhark, which is where the T calendar is directly from, follows the first rule of mathematics, which is measure to and from fixed points. The fixed points is the Earth's orbit around the sun, and the Earth passes through 8 specific points on its corkscrew journey around the sun. The sun being the center point, the gravitational pull point, and the Earth rotates around the center shaft of the sun. As the sun moves in its orbit, the Earth moves in its orbit around the sun itself. The midsummer, June 22nd, midwinter, December 30th, 22nd. There's three fixed points on one side and 3 fixed points on the other, which makes it very, very balanced. But all the time periods between are not equal. They're not all 39 days or 42 days. They range in distances, and the point to all this is the Elder Futhark, unlike Arabic and Latin numbers and letters, where in Latin the characters are letters, and in Arabic the characters are numbers. In this system, all the characters are both used as letters and numbers depending on how they were used. So you literally have, if you have Pertho is the letter P. That's in part where Latin and English got the P from, is by copying the Elder Futhark, the P, the Pertho. If you put two characters side by side, say Hagalaz H and I, you have the ninth sequence of the H and the 11th sequence on the R. So on the right side, so you have 2 characters, one that represents the tens and one that represents the singles, the single digits. Now this is a 24 base number system, not 24 base number and character system, since it's the language and mathematics at the same time, number system at the same time. So you start with Fehu, Uruz, Thurasaz, Ansuz, Raido, Kannaz, Gebo, Winjo. That's the first 8 sequence, AETT, which happens to be the name on the closest approximation of the name on the blade of Enoch, which was given to him by Adam, that blade was given to him by God, or some divine being. It's 3 letters to repeat. 3 letters. AE is 1 letter, and TT repeats. So this fits perfectly within a very, very weird riddle of language. Same. So you have the odd system was built into the Elder Futhark. You have 8 EIGHT characters. That's the first 8. The second 8, the third 8. The second 8 would be Hagalaz, Nafthiz, Isa, Jera, Awaz, which has an interesting spelling, Pertho, Elhaz, and Sawillo. And the third 8 would be Tiwaz, Berkano, Iwaz, Manaz, Laguz, Ingwaz, Othello, and Dagaz. Now, with those 24 sequences, 24 characters, you put that's a single sequence of characters. It works exactly the same way that Arabic does, which is 1 through 9, but there's 24 of them instead of just 9 of them, 10 of them. The 0 being the 10th, which is where the sequence starts again. The entire Futhark sequence is itself a 0. So you have the sequence, Fehu, Uruz, Thurasaz, Raido, Kannaz, Gebo, Winjo, Hagalaz, now these go on, so on and so forth. Well, that's one sequence. Well, when it repeats, you put the F on the second sequence, or you put the U on the second sequence, and the first sequence becomes an F. It's complicated multidimensional mathematics. The people who created the Futhark were not simple. So if the sequence repeats, that first sequence automatically takes on the character of F, and the second sequence takes on the character of U. The second, Fehu, Uruz, Thurasaz, U. Uruz is U. So you take the first letter or the first two letters. In the case of TH, AL, AE, right after Esau is, and right before Pertho is Awaz, which is AEWAZ. You then take that, and of course ing Ingwaz, which would be the right above Othello and right below Laguz, which is the third from the bottom and the fourth from the bottom. Laguz being the fourth from the bottom, Ingwaz being third from the bottom, and below there would be, and the second from the bottom, number 23 would be Othello. You have then you that add the Fehu, Uruz, Thurasaz. Then you put it's the 24 characters. Then you put the first, second, third, fourth, whatever in that left hand spot. When you get 576 done, you then take that same thing and then add it to, and then you then take this and double it. This becomes Fehu. This becomes the same sequence, and this becomes also Fehu, because at this point you know you're going to repeat sequences. So this becomes Fehu, and then it's Fehu, then whatever 24 sequence it is, and then the single number. That's how the number systems work. You also get big numbers real fast. So every single solitary number in existence has a Futhark equivalent, which means that every single solitary number that has a Futhark character equivalent is itself a letter or a letter sequence. Because when you start getting when you start getting past 24, when you start getting past 576 letters, or when you start getting past the first basic sequence, the first 24, then the from 25 to 48. Yeah, there's automatically two letters there, and in the case of Fehu, of Thurasaz, Awaz, Othello, not Othello, but Elhaz, and Ingwaz. In the case of those, then you have 3 or 4 letters, especially with Ingwaz. Specifically to Ingwaz, not especially with Ingwaz, but specifically with Ingwaz. You then have every single solitary letter, every single solitary number that is in existence, which there's infinite numbers. Every one of those translates to a sequence of letters, and that sequence of letters literally translates to a language, the Elder Futhark language, which all have meanings, because Fehu means priorities, Uruz means strength, Thurasaz means boundaries, Ansuz means some type of language, divine information, and such. Raido means journey, physical journey, as opposed to other kinds of journeys, other kinds of motions. Kannaz means a flickering of a light, a candle, a flame, as opposed to education, light, information, knowledge of Sewilla, which is the sun. Then you have Gebo, which is partnerships. The X is partnerships. 2 Kannazes coming together sometimes with the same ideas, sometimes with different ideas. They come together and work together. Partnership. Then you have Winjo W, which is the end of the first 8. It also is a reference to some type of an emotional situation. That's the first end of the first 8. Now that's just the first 8. Each 8 has its own meanings to each of the characters. So each of the when you have a birthday, for instance, everywhere in your existence, your birth date is a word, because it combines whatever the month you were born, that month in the Gregorian calendar, which was created which was adopted in the 1580s by Pope Gregor XIII, based on mathematics done by very, very likely the only mathematician alive capable of doing that math was Leonardo da Vinci, and somewhere between 1470 and 1510, 1520, that mathematics were done by him, because he was one of the only people alive who could do the math. He also had multiple death threats and warrants from the Vatican, so fear of death was not part of his vocabulary, because his friends were too powerful, and they had saved him from death more than a few times, including being under house arrest in the Vatican for 10 years before he was exiled to France. And then from France, it was determined pretty quickly that if he was in France, he was an easier target for the assassins. So he and the French government and the British government working together, not the English government, mind you, the British, beat feet to the colonies, 1495, 97. While he was still under house arrest, and he was taken under house arrest somewhere around 1497 when the French invasion of Italy ended humiliatingly for the King of France, who got back home and had a problem with breathing. He was released about 1512, and he was immediately sent to France. In France, he then went immediately to the colonies to be out of the reach of the Vatican, and he could live the rest of his life coming back and forth across the pond and setting up a pretty comfortable life, even in his 50s, in France, in the Empire of New England, which is the description John Dee gave to New England, the New Britain, the British Empire in the Northeast. The information about this is that the reason why this is important is because I have a theory that what Da Vinci needed to be in New England for, specifically the cities of Salem and Boston, is he needed to create a sequence of think tanks, isolated schools where he could do his work and his students could do his work. He built a school in just 12 miles west of Paris called Versailles. It actually translates to Polytechnic College. Verse is an individual thing, and ILLES translates in OC French to islands. So isolated individual things. So isolated individual things. You have, which translates in Latin, it translates to a thing as a technical thing. So you have a verse becomes technology, because you have to have technology to be able to make a verse, make a thing, the isolated individual thing. Poly being many isolated things. So you have Polytechnic, Versailles, Polytechnic. See the translation? So he built a school at Versailles, and he had a subsequence of campuses in the Northeast, which became the Ivy Leagues, I theorize. All to be able to do one goal: to recreate a Bible based off of what he could find to be a real and actual real information. He created the Bible based on that information, but the King James in about 1610 took it, renamed it for himself, and published it after some edits. And all the people who he had edit from the original into his version, he had beheaded to make sure they didn't say anything. The dead tell no tales, although they do. But it takes forensic science and the application of theoretical physics to history to be able to backfill in what was missing. The Elder Futhark is the foundation language, is the scaffolding language that created the Hebrew, and the entire Torah is written in Hebrew. So you have the Bible, King James version of the Bible, that's based off partially based off of the Torah, and the Torah is written in Hebrew, and the parent language of Hebrew is the Elder Futhark. So the Elder Futhark is the base language that I used to create the T Calendar and AErdology from. So in all very, very hard reality, the map, the word, the dictionary that I'm making out of the 8 fixed points. Now your birthday, back to your birthday. Your birthday is a day. Is one day out of 365.4 days. Well, that birthday has the pearl strings associated. That's your individual birthday. That's your individual pearl count. You are your own pearls. You have your own birthday. You have your own 365-day count. You have your own month. You have your own masculine, feminine months, because this calendar is your calendar, and whoever else was born on at the exact point where you were born, in that exact room, in that exact city, at that exact time, and I mean down to the millisecond when you took your first breath, exact time, that's yours. No one else has your counts, but you have your counts. The person born 5 feet away from you, 2 feet away from you, they have their counts because their first breath was not when you had your first breath, and their 0000 is 2 feet away from yours, and that 2 feet means that they were 2 feet closer to something and 2 feet farther away from something. So the distances, all numbers translate to letters. And when you start putting combinations of repeat pattern letters together, that's a word. So when you start putting repeat pattern numbers together, that's a word. Because when you start putting repeat pattern numbers together, those numbers translate to letters, and those letters translate to a recognizable repeat sequence of letters, which means that that's a word. That word has a meaning, which I just described when I went through the Elder Futhark. The meanings, at least I went through the first 8 meanings. Later videos, I may say describe the second 8 and the third 8 for you. But this information is of key critical information such for you, because this is the language of the universe, of the divine, that you can use to determine how to go about living your life, and what if you do X, if you follow X path, the X path will create those numbers. If you frequent X location for your job, that location has certain number sequences to it. Number sequences, letter sequences, word sequences. How those word sequences and how you interact with how your word sequences, your base word sequences, because your birth date, there's pearl strings with it. There's 8 pearl strings, which means that you were born X amount of days after the previous fixed point of, say, May 1st. You were born 15 days past May 1st. Or if you're born 15 days past May 1st, and you're born Y days after Easter. You were born Z days after Imbolc. You were born A days after Yule, December 22nd. You were born B days after October 31st. Well, each of those has their own plus and minus counts to them. So you take those 16 characters of just the plus and minus of the 365, not counting the time sequences, not counting the time between. There's 40 or 50 or 60 counts that can be added to the pearl that are contained inside the pearl string, the 8 pearl strings. That then you take all that information and then add it to your counts. When were you born? How old was this? How old was the building that you were born in? When was it built? The ages of the medical staff that helped your mother. How old was your mother? How old was your father? All those numbers translate to letters. All those letters translate to, if they're in groups, then words can be created. How old is the building? How old was the neighborhood? When was the neighborhood built? There's hospitals that are relatively brand new. They were built only a few months to a few years ago. There's also hospitals like London that are more than a century old, that are old, more than a millennia old. There's hospitals in Rome that are 2,500 years old. There's hospitals there's hospital buildings in Greece, in Athens, that are 3,000 or 4,000 years old. There's in Egypt. There's majorly old buildings. The Khufu is 4,500 years old, and the Egyptian civilization was more than 1,500 years old before Khufu was built. So there's buildings in that area that are massively ancient. If you're born in one of those buildings, then you have to then the age of that building, age numbers translates to letters, translates to into the word sequence. So you have your own word sequence, your own personal word sequence. Then you add the Pearl counts word sequences to that. All those thousands and thousands of letters, dozens, hundreds of words, several sentences. If you go to work at a location and the words that are created by this organization and the words that are created by you don't match, then that's not a good fit. But if you go to this other path and that you take this other job, those words fit. Those words are more accurate. Those words are more poetic. You will have an easier time of it based off of this mathematics all by itself. So when you start working with this information, my T calendar pearl strings, and the mathematics and Erdology is about you and how you apply to everything on the earth. Every single solitary thing on the earth has its own counts. Those counts translate to letters. Those letters translate into words, and how you interact with those and how they interact with you is already written out. Hence the Tower of Babel concepts that I talked about in another video. This is a universal language. So as you apply it to you, your accounts, your individual stuff, as you apply this, you start to build the story of your life. You start to build the story of your life based off, and then you start adding your counts and the story of your life to everything around you, and you can have a story example of where your story will fit in theirs, or your story will not fit in there, and then you have a roadmap as to how to move forward with your life, and that's the science.